So so can you close the room? It's on. It's already on. Um, let's start then.
Yeah, yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Jungle Center for the Global South and Jungle India Institute panel discussion. Today's topic is Beyond BRICS, a new era for the Global South, perspectives from South Africa and India. I'm Professor Dr. Hibatullah Adam, Professor of Economics at Jungle International School and Jungle School of International Affairs, and founder and director of Jungle Center for Global South and associate director at Jungle India Institute. I will be moderating today's discussion. Before starting, I would like to request, please, Professor Sholia to welcome our guests and give his opening remarks, and then I will proceed. Yeah.
Thank you, Hiba. Greetings, everyone. Is the mic on? Is this on?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's good to see student turnout, even though the exams are closing in. But it's an important topic, and we have important speakers. So we have good reasons to be here, and let me welcome our two distinguished panelists who are here with us. Both of whom I've known and have admired for their work and for their commitment to international affairs and to the global south. Now, I think Heba will introduce them, but let me briefly reflect on the theme. Um, these are two big democracies of the global south, our two countries, and we have a long-standing relationship going back centuries. And now, in the 21st century, there is a sense that these two are rising. I mean, a new era is a bigger thing, but these two countries have a rising trajectory. They are often counted as emerging powers. India probably has the size and the resources and the capacity to even become what we call a great power in the world. South Africa certainly is already a regional power, a big heavyweight in the continent of Africa, and could in time also become a major power in the world. So it's in that context that it's useful for us to reflect on perspectives from these two big countries and perspectives of those who have also worked in each other. So our panelists, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia was our High Commissioner to South Africa. So he knows that side of the Indian Ocean quite well. And Excellency Cedric Crowley is now acting High Commissioner here. So I think they understand each other's countries as well and the way things have evolved. So I think at the bilateral level, it's a strong relationship, and we want to do many bigger things with them to be like the two big pillars of the global south. So that way, there's a lot already happening and much more in store. But then there is the BRICS format of which we are also members. And there is also IBSA. There are a lot of formations in which South Africa and India are together. We are also part of the G77 grouping, very important one in the United Nations for developing countries. So if you take all these, we have a big agenda for change. We share common visions for a fairer world order, one where people of the global south have a greater say in deciding their own fates and also in controlling their own resources. The South agenda is not new. It goes back to at least 50 years or 60 years from Bandung, if you like, from the 1950s and 60s. But now there is this power elite that has emerged within the global south, and there's more variegation. So I think it's in that context that there is a bigger onus on South Africa and India and other big countries like Nigeria, Egypt. There are many others we can name, which are big populous countries and which also have a mandate to take the agenda of the South forward. with the admission of the African Union into the G20, I think we will also see the collective weight of the AU in world affairs much more than before, and that's of course a great historic achievement of the Indian presidency that we all celebrated in 2023. So a new era obviously means strengthening of the nation states, better, higher economic growth, social stability, and greater involvement of countries of the global south in determining the world affairs. If you add up all that, in my view, that is a new era. And so, certainly the question is being asked here. It's not to deny we have a lot of problems, all of us in the developing world. We have a lot of internal problems. But then there is always this aspiration that we are rising or we will rise to the next level. And perhaps given the technological changes and the diffusion and the intensification of South-South as well as South-North and North-South-South and all kinds of formats of cooperation, maybe the rise will be quicker, rather than delayed and long drawn out, as was the case in the 20th century after decolonization. So we tend to be optimistic about the prospects for this new era, but obviously we will need to close ranks and cooperate internally much more for realizing this rise of the South as a whole collectively. And I will again, let me close by talking about the special responsibility for the pillars, the bigger countries within the global South. Um, we will need to be seen to be taking the rest along. And that's a big challenge because sometimes our interests, if you look at split it into different issue areas, sometimes individually our country's interests align with northern countries on certain issues. And sometimes there is division within the South. And creating a kind of a collective interest or common interest is always difficult when the groups are large. G77 is a misnomer because now there are 130 or more member countries in G77, right? So there is this question, and how we deal with the emerging, power realities. There are differences, right? Like we can't deny it. For example, we saw that on the Israel-Hamas conflict. South Africa took a certain position, India took a somewhat different position. Um, on many other issues, of international significance, it has been a challenge to find consensus. So how to grow beyond the national interests and to coordinate better and to form consensus, I think is like the big challenge. It's not the only one. Like I said, economic and internal and social stability and all these things are important. But my own view is that these bigger countries must take regional or sub-regional leadership roles, and the rest of the global south should support the big countries to be able to manage order and stability in the respective regions. I wrote a book on this in 2019 called Trump, Emerging Powers in a Post-American World. I had Brazil, Nigeria, Turkey, and India as case studies in that. And my main point was that, uh, there are the two great powers, but then there are these regional powers, and the onus is on us to be able to maintain order and stability and prosperity in our respective subregions. So if that can happen, if these pillars can really stand up, I think the new era possibility, the chances are higher. And Africa is going very far with continental integration, with the free trade agreement, and many other initiatives to break down the barriers. So I think Africa as a force has become a force. It's much more acknowledged today as rising than was the case even 20 years ago, despite the challenges and the problems. So I think there's a spark out there. Whether we can light it and make it into a flame that transforms the world order, that is the big question we are posing through this. Is it a new era for the global south? I'm sure our esteemed panelists have so much experience in thinking and writing and conducting diplomacy and engaging with our two respective countries, but also with the broader global south, that we will need with their wisdom and their thoughts as well. So let me thank them for their time and for coming here and for enlightening our student minds and triggering new ideas and thoughts, I'm sure, which can help our students to refine their own thinking. We had a Global South week about a month ago where the ambassador of Egypt was here, and the and we did a excellent student poster exhibition and a series of events around it. and Professor Hebat Al-Adam and her team have done amazing work, and I want to congratulate her because I cannot think of our Global South or South-South research and student initiatives reaching this level if not for her leadership. So thank you, Heba, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Merci. Thanks a lot, Professor Shoya. Now, before we dive in and start our discussion, I would like to formally introduce our two esteemed guests to our audience here and online. So we have with us today Mr. Cedric Crowley, the Acting High Commissioner of the Republic of South Africa to India. Mr. Crowley's career highlights include leading South Africa's engagement with the G20 and managing the relationship with the United Nations Development Programme, supporting South Africa's role on the UN Security Council, including chairing negotiations for a landmark resolution on African security, heading the UN Department of Political Affairs liaison team to the Southern African Development Community. Prior to joining the diplomatic service, Mr. Crowley held positions at the University of the Western Cape and served on local transitional town council. He holds degrees in arts, education, and public administration with a focus on global governance. Please join us in welcoming Mr. Crowley. And also we are truly honored to have also with us today Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, distinguished fellow foreign policy studies at the Foreign Policy Studies Program Gateway House. Ambassador Bhatia has had a distinguished career in diplomacy and foreign affairs. His contribution to the Indian foreign policy and diplomacy are widely recognized in both India and abroad. He has also served in various capacities, including as chair of the core group of experts on BIMSTEC and as director of the Indian Council of World Affairs. With his 37-year tenure in the Indian Foreign Service, he has held prestigious positions as ambassador to Myanmar, Mexico, and High Commissioner to Kenya, South Africa, and Lesotho. Ambassador Bhatia is a member of several influential conflicts and council and committees, including CII's International Advisory Council, the FICCI's Task Force on Blue Economy. He is also a founding member of the Kalinga International Foundation and a member of the Governing Council of the Asian Conference. He authored several books, including India in Global Affairs Perspective from Sacro House, India-Myanmar Relations, Changing Contours, and India-Africa Relations, Changing Horizons. So all they are, most of them, they are published with Routledge. Please join us in welcoming Ambassador Bhatia. So now we have to start our discussion. So as Professor Shoya, he has mentioned in his welcoming remarks that the global order is shifting. And today we are going to explore the concept of moving beyond BRICS Plus and whether this signifies a new era for the Global South. We will examine this question through the lens of South Africa and India, the two influential members of the former BRICS bloc, now it is BRICS Plus. By exploring their unique perspectives. So we will have a thought-provoking exploration of the economic development of the BRICS, the international relation, and the future of the Global South. Now to kick off our discussion, I would like to start by asking our esteemed guests to give their to share with us their opening remarks. So let's start first by Mr. Charlie, please.
Thank you, Program Director, Professor Adam, to the Dean, Professor Chalia, my fellow panelists, Ambassador Bhatia, faculty, students, namaste. First and foremost, I'd like to express my gratitude for the great honor of being invited to this very important institution. I just completed a course the other day from Jindal University, so I'm almost a graduate. I'm almost alumni, and I think with this interaction it should contribute to some credits, Professor, so that I eventually become a true graduate of your distinguished university. So the topic today, Beyond BRICS, a new era for the Global South, perspectives from South Africa and India, I think is very timely. It's timely because we live in a period of immense challenges, be it developmental, security, or digital. It is a period of increased polarization and competition, a period that reminds us of the Cold War, where the world is viewed through the lens of a zero-sum game, where the UN Charter, its principles of sovereign equality, is being undermined by very powerful states. A world where you do as we say and you don't do as we do. A world of uncertainty and increased division, a world of paralysis. The very institutions that are created to guide us and to work towards peace and security we've seen in recent times has been paralyzed. So it is a world which is seemingly tilting away from the vision and purposes of the UN Charter. And speaking at the Munich conference, the Secretary General in February said, and he made a very honest decision, he said, referring to the UN, and this would be a shock to all of us. He says, it is not working for everyone. Perhaps not a shock for everyone because we knew that some of the more privileged members have always tried to influence the organization to serve narrow geopolitical interests or national interests. So it's not a shock, but to have that in such a public forum stated so clearly and loudly, I think speaks to the honesty and the integrity of the Secretary General, but it's also a wake-up call because, you know, the UN must be the organization most concerned with all of our well-being, all of our security, all of our development, our human rights. It belongs to us, the people. The preamble paragraphs talk about we the people, which include you, the wonderful students of Jindal. So it's very important that you take an interest in these important topics and I share with you a few perspectives. You know, the Secretary General continued at that Munich conference and he says our world is facing existential challenges. But the global community is more fragmented and divided than at any time during the past 75 years. Even the Cold War, he admits. The Cold War era, he says, in some ways was less dangerous. On a more positive note, he said that multipolarity has created important opportunities for balance and justice and for new leadership on the global stage. But the transition to multipolarity without strong global institutions can create chaos. So I will, in essence, I'll make a point about the importance of multipolarity and contextualize BRICS in there, but also frame it and say that that multipolarity must be framed within the context of the UN Charter, and international law. So in summary, the Secretary General says, We cannot solve the 21st century problems with 20th century tools. And he pleads for what he calls a UN 2.0. So it's an opportunity, it's a time of immense worry, concern, but also an opportunity that creates, out of each crisis, new opportunities arise. On the essence of the Cold War, we have created this institution called the UN. So I think I'm not entirely pessimistic. I think we have an opportunity to influence global governance architecture and to recalibrate. So indeed, the vision of a reformed UN and multilateral architecture is in line with the commitment of BRICS leaders when they state, for example, strengthening and reforming the multilateral system encompasses making instruments of global governance more inclusive, more representative, and participatory to facilitate greater and more meaningful participation of developing and least developed countries, especially Africa, in global decision-making processes and structures, and make it better attuned to contemporary realities. That is the commitment BRICS has made, and it's not a new commitment, it's a commitment that they've expressed from their very beginning. So against this background, and that was a long introduction, I want to focus my talk on three main points. One is a brief historical context of the development of BRICS as a movement of the Global South. Secondly, South Africa's role in terms of the BRICS Summit in 2023. And then thirdly, as we conclude, to share South Africa's perspective on expanded BRICS, a more inclusive BRICS, a more representative BRICS. So those of you that have studied international relations must be familiar with the Bandung Conference, and Professor just raised it as an important rallying point for countries of the Global South as they confronted the challenge of the Cold War, and they did not want to be on either West or the East. They wanted to maintain their independence. They wanted to ensure that concepts such as inclusivity and solidarity galvanize them in terms of collective efforts towards development, independence, decolonization. So it gave birth to the Nagaland movement, and just in a few months ago we had the summit held in Kampala. And so the concept of solidarity and inclusivity has been the foundational concept, I think, of the countries of the South. That has been the tradition of the South. But that tradition also stems from our own national perspectives, I think. Our peculiar historical experiences, be it colonialism and otherwise, has informed our orientation. So in your case, for example, the issue of, and it's not only a slogan, it's a rallying call, as it was even during the G20, that the world is one family. Similarly, our tradition is one of Ubuntu, which means I am because of you. That I cannot be, I cannot progress, I cannot develop without you being developing and you progressing. So there is that collectivity that I think as a societies that we hold quite dear. So again, in the Kampala conference, the issues of solidarity, reform, inclusivity, and sovereign equality was again underlined. So there's a whole tradition, more than almost 60 years now, since the Bandung Conference, again reaffirmed by the non-aligned movement. So that was the point I wanted to make. Even IPSA preceded BRICS, our participation in BRICS. So there's a long history of collaboration in the non-aligned movement, in the group of 77, which you correctly pointed out is now more than 134 countries. So let me speak for the next 2 minutes or 3 on South African BRICS. So you will recall that BRICS was created in 2006 for a ministers level and then elevated to summit level in 2009. BRICS is possibly one of the organizations that expanded the fastest, if you look at membership. because we were the first recipients of this expanded BRICS. When we received the invitation to join the formation, it was BRIC without the S. So in December we were admitted, and then in April we attended the summit in China. And we attended and participated in BRICS because we have like 4 cardinal pillars for foreign policy. One of it is South-South cooperation, and as you correctly say, also South-North dialogue. Because we do have relations, I think I mentioned earlier to Professor Adam in a private conversation, with all of the countries of the world. We have to, if we are that family that the Indian Sanskrit text reminds of us of. And which family doesn't have problems, have disagreements, differences, but we work it out, don't we? And so we cannot expect BRICS to be this homogeneous society where there's no differences. Not at all. The value of BRICS is exactly the fact that despite the differences, we can coalesce, agree, and reach consensus and consensual decisions. But I'm digressing now. Let me go back to the text. So we were invited. And our foreign minister at that time, who was also incidentally an ambassador to India, Madam Mkuhana Mashabane, he says the rationale for South Africa's approach was in consideration of a matter of crucial importance to BRICS member states, namely the role of emerging economies in advancing the restructuring of the global political, economic, and financial architecture into one that is more equitable, balanced, and rests on the important pillars of multilateralism. That's what the minister said. We are not joining to create an alternative to, but we want to strengthen the existing multilateral system codified in the UN Charter and its principles. Our approach to intensifying our relationship with emerging powers and other countries of the South is, of course, through active bilateral engagement, in addition to the work that we do in NAM and the G77, as well as in the UN itself. So our membership has also expanded the BRICS reach in terms of geography, because now a country of Africa was also included in the configuration. And we use or seek to use BRICS to advance our national interests, including addressing the challenges of inequality, unemployment, and poverty. But what we seek for ourselves is also what we seek for the global community. And the sustainable development goals, you can see if you look at text of the G20 and of BRICS, is to see how we can also strengthen that, whether it is through debt relief, whether it is through provision of special drawing rights, making loans available, addressing climate change. Those are issues that will, in our view, address the challenges of inequality, of poverty, of unemployment. So what we seek for ourselves nationally is what we also seek the globe. Because remember I said we are because you are. And that our welfare is interconnected. You know, Mandela perhaps placed it much better when he said we cannot be an island of prosperity and an ocean of poverty. It will affect you. You cannot close your borders in Europe if people are hunger and they're fighting wars and conflicts, which in most cases they've not started themselves. So I'll chase up of the BRICS another 2 minutes. I have another 5 minutes, and then I'll conclude. So we held the important BRICS summit last year under the theme Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth, Sustainable Development, and Inclusive Multilateralism. You see the importance of multilateralism. It's a theme that is, even if you look at the Russian theme for their presidency this year, it is in aid of multilateralism, not to replace multilateralism. And that is a point I'll come to later, because I think there is an attempt to position BRICS as an alternative to it. And that is something we want to debunk from the very onset. So our president then indicated our vision for the chairship. He said, our vision for BRICS is as a champion of the needs and concerns of the people of the Global South. This includes the need for beneficial economic growth, sustainable development, and reform of multilateral systems. We reiterate our commitment to inclusive multilateralism and upholding international law, including the purposes and principles enshrined in the UN Charter. So I don't know where people get this idea from, that we are some threat to someone somewhere. Perhaps it's insecurity, perhaps they fear the rise of the South and think that the rise of the South is a threat to their dominance. But if your purpose is to dominate, of course, when others grow, you will become a bit jittery. And so I think it's more reflection on their own ambition to dominate than the role and vision of the UN, of the BRICS, to infuse greater inclusivity, solidarity, and representation. So that was, you know, when I say I'm short, that was our presidency, and I won't go back to it, except when I speak on the expansion. But one of the most important, I think, outcomes of our summit was, perhaps before I talk to the outcome, one of the important characteristics of our summit was the fact, you know how many countries, who can tell me how many countries attended the BRICS summit in Johannesburg? How many countries? There were 31, most of Africa and then global South countries in the main. So when we say inclusivity, at the same time, India held the G20 chairship, and you will recall the number of invitee countries that participated, and that Africa was included as a member of the G20. A remarkable decision. But can you see the orientation, both India, South Africa, towards inclusivity, expanding membership? And I think that's perhaps the most significant development, is that the second phase of expansion took place in the country that was the beneficiary of the first expansion. Remember I told you we were invited in 2010 after BRIC was formed. And here we are, the country, the recipient, inviting 6 more countries to come and participate. And I'm sure you know all those 6 countries, né? I don't have to mention them. Should I quiz them, Professor, on whether they know the 6 countries that were included, including the home country of Professor Adam? You know it, né? So I'm not going to... Must I spell it out, or for your benefit, should I? No, I think let's give them homework, Professor, and I shall come and mark it tomorrow. So that was an important development, a significant development, because already in terms of GDP, purchasing power, BRICS outshines the G7, or is more, has overtaken the, not that it's a competition, but it's just a reality that because of our population, because of our youth, our growth will be much much more important engines of development. Because Europe is aging, Asia, with the exception of China and some other, India and some other countries, is also aging. So where will growth come from? It will come from India, it will come from Asia, it will come from Africa. So we are important pillars. So we have expanded, and for those worried about the quiz and not paying attention, let me give you the names of the countries that were invited. It was Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So that is the countries that expanded. 2 countries has not taken up, Argentina has not taken up the invitation, and Saudi has so far not taken up the invitation. It's under active consideration, I believe. So let me make the following concluding remarks. So BRICS has been seen, as I argued, as a counterweight to Western hegemony by many countries. And some look at us as this counterweight and as an alternative center in a multipolar world. However, BRICS does not intend to take over the role of hegemon or move decision-making power outside the UN. If you look at our statement, it's always in support of whether multilateral outcomes, whether it's the SDGs or climate change initiatives that are being taken. So it's not something outside. It's peace, peacekeeping, creating conditions for development to exist. So the joint statement, of 2021, again, the BRICS foreign minister stated that emphasized the importance of reforming the multilateral system, including the Security Council. They affirmed upholding international law, including the Charter of the UN. Global financial payment systems are increasingly, we've witnessed, being used as instruments of geopolitical contestation. Global economic recovery relies on predictable global payment systems and the smooth operations of banking supply chains, trade, tourism, and financial flows. Practical measures are being explored by BRICS to facilitate trade and investment flows, including to increase use of local currency. So there was a massive, I think, the media hype about de-dollarization, etc. But what we have seen is a natural occurrence and development. The countries decide that they will trade in their own currencies. So it's not that we want to dethrone the dominant dollar currency, but it is to facilitate trade on more inclusive and equal terms amongst each other. So perhaps that is the threat that some see to de-dollarization. But the BRICS summit decided and tasked the finance ministers and the central governors of reserve banks to report on local currency payment instruments and platforms at the next summit. The urgent need for global governance, I would also argue, is not limited to the UN. All global political, economic, and financial and social structures should be modernized and made fit for purpose. Remember what the Secretary General said, it's not working for everyone. The expectations by countries of the South is that BRICS must use its influence and power to drive urgent reforms of these institutions and make it more just, more fair. So it is about creating more representative organizations, because remember, these things were created almost 100 years ago. BRICS institutions like the New Development Bank, so it's not only about talking, we also created important institutions like the New Development Bank that during the period of COVID, we as a country also were the recipients of some $1 billion towards our financial needs to combat the disease of COVID. So that, I think, is the summary, the broader points I wanted to draw to. And so finally, I want to conclude again by, is that my cue to stop? 1 second. That was very loud, Professor. I quoted the Secretary General expressing great concern. And so I want to end also by quoting him when he says, but this time he's more hopeful. Remember, I said he was very pessimistic. Now he says, and this is our hope, this is the hope for BRICS. He says, if countries fulfill their obligations under the UN Charter and international law, every person on earth would live in peace and dignity. If every country respected the Charter of the UN, every person on earth will live in peace and dignity. And that was the promise of the founding of the UN, wasn't it? To create a peaceful society, build on the skirts of all the level, creating larger freedom, immediate economic prosperity for our people. So I would argue that BRICS will and continue to play a significant and critical role in ensuring that we recalibrate the global order and tilt it once more to the purposes and vision of the UN Charter, and in creating a multipolar world, a world where there's not one country dominating, but there are various centers of power based on solidarity and sovereign equality. So I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to interacting with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crowley, for sharing your insights and thank you. For sharing your insights about BRICS and South Africa. Now I would like to call Ambassador Bhatia to share also his opening remarks with us. Ambassador Bhatia.
Thank you very much, Professor Adam. Dear friend, Acting High Commissioner Frederick Crowley, distinguished delegation of South African diplomats, faculty members, and dear students. I'm very happy that you already have had a detailed presentation on various aspects of the topic today, and so that makes my task easier because I can focus on some of the crucial issues that I really want to highlight today. I would like to make very few introductory remarks, then talk about some issues pertaining to the global south, and then go and attack the journey of BRICS from Johannesburg to Moscow. And thereafter I shall spell out India's perspective. So it's going to be a very systematic and structured way to deal with this. By way of introduction, I must say that your crafting of the topic for this panel discussion is brilliant. The topic, Beyond BRICS, a new era for the global south, perspectives from South Africa and India. It compels you to think as to what really the organizer and the host want you to say. The topic is enticing, it is puzzling, and it is thought-provoking. Is it about BRICS? Is it about global south? Or is it about something else? Maybe a linkage between the two. It compels you to think, it compels you to reflect. And so, knowing that South Africa bore the burden of the presidency brilliantly for a year before it was passed on to Russia, I thought I would begin with Global South first. And I do it appropriately, recognizing the background of knowledge in this room on this subject. Now, the term Global South raises fundamental definitional issues. What is Global South? And who has meant to use it to convey certain meanings? Are we referring to the equator and all the countries and regions north of the equator and the countries south of the equator? That is, those which are in the north are rich and those which are in the south are poor. If that is the case, what happens to China and Singapore and Australia and South Korea, countries which are either along the equator or south of the equator? Or some scholars would say, what happens to poorer regions in US, Mexico, Europe? They are north of equator, but they are poor. Where do they go? So the point I think we need to remember that global south is not a geographical term. It is a geo-economic and geopolitical term, and it has now come to dominate the narrative on international relations. And therefore, I think all of you budding IR experts need to debate among yourself after studying in detail the origin and the genesis of this phrase, because as you noticed last year under India's presidency, this was turned into a major theme of India's G20 presidency. So global south is a term here to stay, and we will have to be very clear about the definition. A quick word about the numbers game on global south. Now, as we know, UN has 193 members. Only a state can be a member, 193. So presumably, there still are a few countries which are not members of the UN. So roughly we can say there are about 200 countries, of which 193 are members of the UN. What about G77, which is the forum which was set up, as you heard, before the word global south was invented? So in the olden era, G77 was the forum for developing countries, and it has 134 countries as members. 134. And Uganda is, obviously hosting the summit very soon. There is another organization, NAM, Non-Aligned Summit. That too is often seen as a Global South forum, but separately for Global South as it exists today, there is no independent formal forum. That is something we have to keep in mind. But it is also important to remember that last year, when India took an extremely innovative step of hosting not one but two Global South summits, first in January last year and then in November, something like 125 to 130 countries took part. They all belonged to Global South. And some which belonged to Global South actually were not invited because they were already in G20. So you have to be very clear about the definitional issues and about the numbers issues. Now, what does Global South really want? I'm sure in your department you have gone into this in great detail, and I will come to this at the end. What does Global South really want? You have heard the South African viewpoint seen from the prism of BRICS. I will elaborate it at the end. But let me raise a very controversial question. One is the leadership issue in Global South. Who is the leader of Global South, or who are the leaders of Global South? And even more fundamentally, are some of the obvious countries such as China and Russia, are they part of Global South? I think this is a subject you should discuss among yourself and try to reach to some conclusion. What we know is China was not a member of G77. When China worked with G77, the grouping was called G77 plus China. In other words, the two were separate. Russia was never part of G77. So are they now regarded as part of Global South, or are they East? Because it is not just North and South, but it is also West and East. So it's a challenging scholarship issue and also a diplomatic issue as to which country is South and which country is not South. And the enigmatic answer of India's foreign minister on this issue, please remember that he said those who are from Global South, they know it. And those who are not from it, they don't know it. So you work it out, you decipher it. But there is, at the end of the day, an unspoken feeling that the countries which suffered at the hands of colonialism are largely members of the Global South. So keep that in mind. I'm not giving a definitive view, but we are welcome to discuss it at the discussion level if you so wish. So in this background, let me quickly shed some light on key issues of the BRICS. I don't have to go into the history, it's been very beautifully presented. All that I can do is to turn a little bit into autobiographical mood here to just cheer you up and make you more engaged, because even South African diplomats may not fully know the story of how the journey from BRIC to BRICS occurred. I was High Commissioner of India at the time, and our three-country grouping IPSA was doing extremely well. And I remember very well a meeting in Cape Town of these three foreign ministers, where the idea came up that why don't you make IPSA as a four-country forum by including China in it. This was proposed by South Africa, and the other two countries, India and Brazil, were not terribly enthusiastic about it. Mainly because IPSA is the forum of democracy. Only a democracy can become a member of IPSA. And so the counter view was presented that, the request is difficult to be met. And it is thereafter, then the subsequent development took place, which was convert BRIC into BRICS by bringing in South Africa there, and that is how BRICS became the newer and better and stronger forum, even as then IPSA began to lose its steam in the next decade. So this is another very interesting and sensitive turn in the history of international relations that our young scholars should study. But be that as it may, we are talking now here of a very short journey of BRICS from Johannesburg to Moscow. And I want to highlight the fact that South Africa did tremendous work in making BRICS a big success during its presidency. It was the time when a paradoxical thing was happening. On the one hand, many of us within BRICS felt that BRICS is not doing enough to grow. Having done the new development bank, having done CRA, having done political coordination, remember, COVID had come, India-China border clash had taken place, Russia was getting involved with Europe more and more. There was a sense of lack of optimism about BRICS. And yet the paradoxical thing was that outside BRICS club, a long queue of countries was being formed which wanted to join BRICS. So internally we may have felt that BRICS was not doing all that great, but outsiders thought that BRICS was a great club and we must get the membership. So the greatness of South Africa was to try to remove this paradox by putting fresh energy into BRICS and by taking headlong the question of the expansion 2.0. This is my genuine admiration for South African diplomacy. They invited all of Africa, and not just Africa, but they also invited several Global South institutions so that there could be almost a universal representation of countries at the BRICS summit. And more importantly, a very substantive Johannesburg Declaration was produced. Many important features have been highlighted. I think there was the idea of inclusive multilateralism. There was this very funny thing for a year, for about a decade or more. When it came to the question of the UN Security Council reform, year after year, China and Russia would ensure that all the efforts of India, Brazil, and South Africa to show some advancement would be blocked, but not at Joburg. Joburg, the diplomats sat through the night to produce a new formulation which had been frozen for the past 1 decade, and it was an improvement. It is not a magical wand, but in diplomacy, as you know, things move incrementally. And this new formulation, and you can have a look at it, basically says that China and Russia support the idea of greater role by these three countries, including in the UN Security Council. So this was a forward movement. Expansion we have talked about, and the final thing of Johannesburg Declaration was that there was a clear political commitment that on the three pillars of BRICS there would be forward movement on political and security cooperation, on economic and financial cooperation, and on social and cultural cooperation. So the road was very clearly laid out that we cannot live on past achievements only, we have to build new achievements. And I must say, very frankly, that the Russian leadership has taken upon that challenge frontally. I've been tracking Russian presidency now since President Putin's last inaugural address, and some of the things coming out of Moscow show very clearly that they are set on developing BRICS strategic partnership in all key areas, not just political and economic, but very innovative technological areas, in the field of health, in the field of humanitarian welfare, and in terms of developing this as an institution. And let me be also very clear, President Putin announced that after the last expansion, there are still 30 countries standing outside to become members of BRICS. And he took a very clear position, receiving the mandate from Johannesburg, that our task first is to socialize the new members into the BRICS philosophy, and those who are standing outside, we will create a basis on which they can serve as partners. So in short, India and Russia and probably South Africa seriously believe that first do the consolidation internally of the BRICS, and then only think of some further expansion. Go slow on expansion. Brazil also shares this view. I'm not sure about China, but the fact is that you have to take things step by step. You cannot be a club of 5 and call 30 or 40 people and say, now we will still call it BRICS. Because the very first thing those guys will say, I object to the name. The new 6 people who have been brought in, and as very rightly pointed out, 2 are still. One is clear no, the second one is orange light. The other 3 have no problem with the name. So we have to remember that we have to be pragmatic. My last point very quickly is about India's perspective. I think since largely the audience is Indian here, I presume you know India's policy. Among the various multilateral institutions of which India is a member, if I have to make a top category of groupings which are very, very important to India, I think BRICS will figure in that category. Probably that category will have groupings like G20, Quad, BIMSTEC, but certainly BRICS will be there. I cannot say that all of them can be put in there, but if you're looking at top 4 or 5 groupings that India regards strategically important, BRICS is one of them. So you can understand and appreciate that our establishment gives a very high priority to the expansion of BRICS, to the intensification of cooperation. Why? Because BRICS is seen as an instrument for multipolarity, as my friend and colleague said here, and it is also seen as a guarantor of India's strategic autonomy. So India wants to play a balancing role in the world. BRICS is an instrument, is a guarantee to make sure that when it comes to its central interests, they align with the developing world, and BRICS is there to promote this. I could also say, citing the leadership's comments in this country, it was pointed out that all the 5 members, more or less, are non-West. When you say West, it really means basically G7. So when you say non-West, that means none of this country is a member of G7. We are non-West, said the foreign minister. But we are not all anti-West. Certainly, South Africa, if I may be allowed to speak for my friend, India, Brazil, these 3 cannot be described as anti-West by any stretch. About the 2 other countries, their friends, their scholars, their diplomats will have to speak for themselves. And this is the problem. In BRICS, in the further working and evolution, often 2 or 3 trends emerge, and it's only when consensus develops that BRICS moves forward. I agree with Cedric that you cannot imagine BRICS to be agreed on everything, but the trick is that they find a way to work together through consensus on issues of common interest. And I'm very hopeful, I'm very optimistic that the Russian presidency will contribute to this process. There are challenges, we can talk about them, but as of now, we can be quite hopeful of the future. My last point, what does the Global South want, and to what extent BRICS can help it to achieve it? Now, you can't find one document that tells you clearly what does the Global South want. But I think the Indian establishment came very close to listing the demands of the Global South. And I request all your friends and students to go and look at the chairman's summary of the Voice of South Summit held in November 2023. It is there on the record, it is on the MEA's website. It is chair's summary, which means at the end of the summit, the chair, that is India, said that after consulting everybody, we feel that this is the sense of the House and this is what the Global South wants. I have the list here, maybe I'll read it out later, but the point to remember is that fundamentally the Global South wants justice and equity. It wants more representative institutions. It wants money for development. It wants money for dealing with climate crisis. It wants money for handling the sustainable development challenges. And it wants reforms in these key institutions, multilateral development banks, UN Security Council, United Nations General Assembly, and many others. And at the end of the day, they also want peace and harmony. They want the end of terrorism, and they want essentially very much a focus on women-led development, on digital transformation. So there are 10 demands of the Global South presented through the mouth of the chair of the Global South Summit. But there will be, this is not ironclad. As we meet again in G77 and elsewhere, we'll get to develop this further as well. I think we should be clear that Global South is a force to reckon with, and in many, many ways, BRICS is there to help Global South to achieve its goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bhatia, for sharing these informative opening remarks about what is Global South, and also some history about BRICS establishment and India perspective about Global South and BRICS. Now I would like to guide our discussion through some key aspects. And I will start by myself first asking questions to our guest speakers, and then I will open the floor for questions from the audience participants. My first question goes to Mr. Crowley. South Africa, as you have highlighted in your opening remarks, has played a key role in establishing BRICS. What factors do you see leading South Africa to look beyond the current BRICS frameworks and advocate for its expansion? And how South Africa leverage its, I hope you will get my English, she hasn't understood it. So how South Africa leverage its position to foster greater collaboration and partnership among developing nations, especially the African countries.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for those questions, Professor. You know, I think there's something unique about our development as a country, one that was the skunk of the world during the apartheid years, one where we were not part of the government and left democratic institutions. But you know, even under those circumstances in 1955, ordinary people, political organizations outside the formal structures came together and elaborated what became known as the Freedom Charter, setting out their vision of the world they want to live in. And that vision spoke about the friendly relations, the peaceful relations. You know, also perhaps because we are not very big economically, militarily, and otherwise, we know how it feels to be on the outside. And it's not a nice place if others decide for you. You want to be part of that decision making. That's how our people felt when we were oppressed by the white minority government. And so our belief in democracy and inclusivity is not some theoretical construct, it's born out of our own desire. And if we live in a world which we all have to share, then certainly all the voices are required and needed. And so perhaps because we are not a threat to anyone, we are not militarily very strong, the biggest or the mightiest, we have soft power. Because out of our negotiations, where divergent views, positions, we were able to bring people together and say, this is the path. We think that creates a fantastic opportunity for our country to advocate for the inclusion of others, including Africa and the South. And because we also were the beneficiary of an expanded BRICS in 2010, 2011. This thing of having exclusive platform, the G7, if you look at the G7, it's something they also realized, or the G8 then. They knew they could not speak on behalf of all of us. Even in their engagements, they select countries of the South to come and speak at certain intervals. You have a special agenda for it, where countries of the South, including India, South Africa, sometimes Brazil, are invited, and they hear you as an invited guest. So you're always an outsider. But we believe in sovereign equality. If sovereign equality is the principle that drives international relations, then everyone's voice is important. But it is difficult. Everyone, the UN will tell you how difficult it is to negotiate with 193 countries. But if the UN can set the frameworks and the BRICS can contribute to greater representation to that debate and to establishing those outcomes, then I think it is important for us to do. And so we will always advocate for greater participation. I think what we have now and what was stated correctly is that we have, very transparently negotiated what is called the BRICS membership expansion guiding principles, standards, criteria, and procedures. Opening the door for all those 30 now or 40, however many they may be, and spelling out exactly what is required, how they can do it, and the foundational principles to which they should prescribe. And the door is not closed on anyone. You see, if your objective is to dominate, then you want to keep the pie very small and distribute it among you and your friends. But we are not in the business of dominating anyone. That has never been in the equation, in our equation and calculation. And so you are welcome. Whether you are a small country without any significant power, ambition, you are one of us, because the principle says inclusivity, the principle says solidarity and sovereign equality. I think that, in broad terms, is what influences us as a country, and of course our own path of exclusion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kravitz. So now my next question is to Ambassador Bhatt. In your opening remarks, you have mentioned India's perspective regarding Global South. So also India has also been a leading voice in the BRICS since its early establishment until date. What are your thoughts on the limitation of the BRICS model for India? Is there any limitations? And how does India perceive its role in shaping a new era for the Global South? What specific challenges and opportunities does India face in pursuing this path?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we are all here to support and strengthen BRICS. And one way to do that is to be honest about its challenges and its limitations also. I agree, therefore, that there is a rationale behind your question. I think BRICS was born and in an era when the world had seen the monopoly of power by the US. That was also the time when G7 was very strong. That was the first decade of the century. But things have changed in the second and the third decade. US is no longer a unilateral, single wielder of power. And then, of course, since then, power has shifted from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Europe and America to Asia. So in that sense, BRICS is a beneficiary of that power shift. At the same time, I think we must be honest and recognize that in this decade, which I describe as the decade of crises and conflicts, he called it, quoting UN Secretary General, a period of turmoil. For me, it is crisis and conflicts. And it is quite remarkable that before the first one settles down, the second one is generated. You had the COVID crisis, you had Ukraine, you had Gaza, you had Israel, Iran, and you just don't know when there will be a flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific coming up. So in this light, we have to recognize that Russia's engagement with Ukraine has created new challenges and limitations for BRICS. China-India border conflict has created a new limitation for BRICS. When the two countries are not even talking to each other directly on bilateral relations, there is a limit beyond which their multilateral cooperation may not proceed further. So it is important for the three Asian big powers to recognize that their multilateral diplomacy has to be of the kind that helps their common child, BRICS. Now, turning to your second part of the question, Global South, as I made it very clear from my presentation, Global South is a much bigger phenomenon than BRICS. It would be wrong to conclude that BRICS is the Global South. Global South exists beyond BRICS. BRICS can help Global South, but Global South has to do more. And I would point out my study of history shows that neither G7 nor non-aligned movement, and therefore nor Global South, can afford to have a single leader. It has to be a situation of multiple leaders. It has to be a situation of collective leadership. And I'll answer my own question that I had raised about China. If China is not a member of G77 or Global South, what is it? Objectively speaking, it is clearly a friend and partner of the Global South. It is a strategic partner of many countries in the Global South. But when it comes to providing leadership to the Global South, that will have to come from the Global South itself, and not from those who are outside the Global South.
Yeah, true. Now let's move to, since we have Ambassador Bhatia and Mr. Crowley, so two diplomats from the two countries. Let's speak now about South Africa-India relations. My question goes to Mr. Crowley, and Ambassador Bhatia will join us later for the same question. How do you see the relationship between South Africa and India evolving beyond BRICS? And are there specific areas where South Africa and India can work together to advance the interests of the Global South?
Thank you, Professor Adam. I think the good multilateral relations is built on fantastic bilateral relations. If the relationship at the bilateral level is working very well, then of course it spills over to the multilateral system. And so we have very solid foundations bilaterally with India. We have just celebrated 30 years of diplomatic relations. But the relationship, that diplomatic relations, is a relationship between the governments, formal relations. Our relationship, people to people, with India spans much longer. The indentured laborers that came from India to work on the sugar plantations in Durban, for example, 1860s, 70s. You're very Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, you send us a lawyer. As my ambassador, always, my former High Commissioner used to say, India sent us a lawyer and we sent back a Mahatma to you because of the experience he built up there. So we have these mutual leaders that we all celebrate and revere. So long before diplomatic relations between the government, which is very formal, very cordial, and very strategic, we have this people to people. We have close to 2 million Indians living in South Africa and contributing to the success and development of our country. So I think there's a lot that we can do bilaterally in terms of, we spoke about it earlier when we said perhaps our universities should connect more capacity building. There's work in the ICT and digital. There's work in health that we can promote. So those things will continue. But I think what we also did very well and continue to do well is to champion the cause of the South at global multilateral fora, including at the WTO, when the challenge of COVID confronted us and people were hiding between intellectual property rights to secure their profits. It was countries like India and South Africa that could play a leading role in being the conscience of this world and say, how can you and how dare you, at the stage where humanity is suffering, put profit before the lives of millions of people. And so we saw the injustice of this very system that are supposed to create the enabling environment for all of us to flourish. When it came to their national interests and their people, they closed the borders and sealed off the vaccines and said it will not be exported. It was countries of the South, including China and India, that made the vaccines available, even at a time when they were themselves struggling. Even Cuba suffering under the yoke of sanctions by the mighty countries of this world, were able to provide medical support to countries. You see how the orientation is of countries of the South. And you see, I quite agree with the Foreign Minister of India here. Global South is an orientation. What is your orientation? And that will tell me whether you belong to the South or the West. So that is my sense. Fantastic bilateral relations, increasingly at the economic level. There are benefits, there's increase in trade, there's increase in tourism, and I think that is important, and that of course becomes the building block for us to also advance multilaterally. I think that if you speak to your Sherpa, which I think you will have shortly at the university, he was the first to recognize that the successful negotiations of the G20 outcome document was also attributed to the contribution of Brazil and India. I think he mentioned a few other countries, Indonesia, in ensuring that a consensus could be reached. So I think that's how we collaborate and cooperate in support of each other, because eventually what we want is, in the main, to the benefit of the global South. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'll give you short and candid and constructive replies to both your questions. I have greater freedom because I do not work inside the government, and you will appreciate when you hear me what I'm going to say. I think as someone who has worked in the system and seen the inside of the India-South Africa relations, we have every reason to be happy and proud that in the past 3 decades we have come where we are. The relationship is very cordial and cooperative and truly friendly. But have we achieved the maximum? Have we reached the optimal level? No, we have not done that. We have to achieve much more, and all that I can do is to make 3 suggestions. One is that truly 2 countries, India, South Africa, of the kind of potential and history that drive us, we must have an annual political summit. In this day and age, when your leaders meet only once in 2, 3 or 4 years, frankly the relationship simply does not shape up. So an annual summit between the President of South Africa and Prime Minister of India is a must. Second, I think the economic communities, the business communities of the 2 countries, they have not done enough to expand the trade, investment and technology linkages. So there is something that needs to be focused on. And third, since we are sitting here in the university environment, believe me, South African universities are world class. If South Africans and other African students can come to study in Indian universities, it is time that our youth also thought of reciprocating and going to some of the top universities in South Africa. You will really have a new world open to you. So this is my constructive answer on the bilateral suggestions. Second, how India and South Africa can work together in BRICS to help the cause of Global South? The answer is very clear. The answer is by making IBSA stronger. IBSA is the original grouping, as I explained, of India, South Africa, Brazil. In BRICS, more so now that we have 11 or 10 or 9 members, the original IBSA solidarity is very important because sometimes there is partisanship within the decision making of BRICS. But these 3 countries, 3 democracies from 3 different continents, bound by common perceptions, by common interests, let them provide collective leadership to the global south. And I should be very clear, only these 3 countries cannot be leaders. There will be others. Look at the new members of the BRICS. They will also rightly aspire to be leaders of Global South, and even outside them, there are other leaders who would have a right to claim that leadership. So while there will be maybe 6, 10, 12 major countries that will have to bear the responsibility of leading Global South, certainly IBSA will have a serious and unique role in taking BRICS and also Global South forward.
Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia. Now I would like to ask the participants here if they have questions, they may raise their hand and ask before we move to the last section of our discussion. Any questions? Yes, Sarkar. Introduce yourself first and then.
Good afternoon to both the panelists. I'm Satyam Mukherjee. I am the coordinator of General Center for Global South. It's a very insightful discussion made by both your excellencies and had a lot of insights on solidarity of Global South and of course the significance of BRICS. Now you mentioned about the New Development Bank of BRICS, which is a very important institution. So I just want to hear your thoughts and both of you your thoughts on the augmentation of trade for BRICS. Now while the bank itself is a very big institution, but the augmentation of trade is happening in BRICS because the economies are also of scale and they're also growing. And China also majorly contributes to the trade share of the intra-trade BRICS trade. So what else is being done at BRICS level? Because the BRICS currency was not really something which materialized. So what else is being done at the BRICS level to augment trade and create a successful trading bloc of BRICS?
Okay, no, thank you very much, Satam, for that question. It's not that the BRICS currency never materialized, it was never on the table. There was no such thing as a BRICS currency, I don't think. I think it's something the media hyped up. There was talks about trade in local currency. So that's a different perspective because BRICS currency would presuppose that you want to move away from the dollar or have it in opposition to the dollar. I think that what you saw in the newspapers then was the frustration with how the dollar has been politicized as an instrument for geopolitical gain. And that is a sad situation, that one country, because of its dominance, abused the system for its own unilateral purposes and ambitions. But the good story about BRICS is that the trade, if you project and you track the trade, for example, my home country, within the BRICS context, how that has exponentially increased since becoming a member. I think that is one of the success stories that is perhaps underreported. The involvement of the business community with each other, meeting each other, having conferences and having shared a platform, I think that has also enabled the flow of business between the countries. More importantly, I think also BRICS invest and in infrastructure that will facilitate the trade, whether it is investment in harbors, in roads, in creating greater connectivity. Those are the enablers of trade, and so you would have to look at that not only in terms of the dollar and rupee equation, the monies that come, but also in that broader developmental frame. All these countries in the BRICS have also expressed support for the African Union for its development agenda, including its rollout of the Continental Free Trade Area. Now, I don't know. I know I'm not talking about general university students when I say that some still view the continent as a basket case. This continent that possesses some of the most important critical minerals, that's home to 1.3 billion people, that has a collective GDP equal to your GDP, 3.4 trillion. So you think of us as some basket case and not as a partner. That's why I say I see you not. So that's why I say I'm not talking about this student specifically. But you know that how that continent, the growth of Africa, the growth of India, of China, is important for global economic growth. Your growth, and you are one of the fastest growing emerging economies, I think even not only to qualify it as emerging, any economy globally, India ranks amongst the top in terms of GDP growth. That is important. Your market, we have just had good news about our avocados, but increasingly our fruits are coming into your market. So look out for that South African flag next to the pears and avocados. It's fantastic. And so I think, you know, where the collaboration still needs to be, you know, this whole issue during the Ukraine and Russia conflict, the issue of food security. You know where the land is that will feed this globe? Where do you think people will find land? It's on our continent. And this thing has been identified by Prime Minister Modi, I think, when he was in Kampala and elaborated the principles for African engagement. And agriculture was right up there. And sometimes we look down on agriculture. Sometimes, you know, we see traders. Can you sell me a cell phone? But you know, food security or insecurity is such a major threat. And so if we do not collaborate in those areas, I think we as a world will suffer significantly. So your investment in technology, your use of ICT in terms of growing the crops, I think is important. But where we can collaborate also more on the structural level is to ensure that the rules of the game is not unfairly placed against Africa, pitted against Africa, be it in the area of agriculture, because you know of the subsidies that European countries and the Americas are paying towards their farmers that make their African exports uncompetitive. You know of all the rules that the artificial rules that they put in place preventing our exports of entering their market. It's not as if we don't have things to trade. But what I must inform you and as a sign of Africa's greater assertiveness is that African continent, the countries don't want anyone to come and export and, our raw materials. They want you to come and beneficiate, to work with those countries to develop them and make sure that they are the benefactors. I went to a talk the other day. It was about some nut. I'm not sure which nut it was. That thing is exported from West Africa, go to Vietnam, come back to somewhere in Europe, and then go back to Africa at 14 times the price. How ridiculous is that? Huh? So the structural imbalance, and I think it's deliberately done also. Huh? If I can keep you underdeveloped, I benefit. But if you go and look at Botswana, what it has done with the bears in terms of negotiations, your future technology, your EVs, etc., will require resources from our continent. And that is going to come at a price. It will come with the demand that you invest and beneficiate in the continent so that our people truly benefit. So, my friend, it's been a long response to your short question. But my summary is that the trade has increased significantly due to that membership. You know, relations are good between countries, but it's also by virtue of the fact that you are big players. You are. I mean, how many of the BRICS countries are in the top 10, 20 of this world economy? So it's also a function of that reality. So thank you so much.
Well, here is the short answer. The success of a multilateral grouping is decided by the quantum of the that grouping trade. Take, for example, the European Union. Take, for example, ASEAN. In comparison, BRICS is far behind. Even the new BRICS is far behind. Second, the trade picture is totally skewed. China's trade with each of the BRICS members is going up. But when it comes to the other countries, their bilateral trade, it is not growing up dramatically by any stretch. So clearly there is a problem. There is a problem, and that needs to be looked at. And I very much hope that the Russian presidency is going to do that, because unless and until you make trade pillar as a very powerful pillar, it will only be rhetoric that we want to strengthen economic cooperation. Thank you.
More questions? Any more? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for the amazing discussion. I'm Raghav. I coordinate the Jindal India Institute. I also work as an editor-at-large with the International Relations, which is a renowned website in the field of IR. I personally research international relations theory and relational and non-dual worldviews. What I feel that the problem lies at the root is, which is the study of IR, which is done all over the world, starts with materialist worldviews, including realist and liberal theories, which form the building blocks of our worldviews as IR theorists and both as also practitioners. We are poisoned pretty much at the beginning of our journeys in IR. And as an inspiring IR theorist, my question to you as a practitioner is that how do we bridge that divide? Is that when we research on relational worldviews, for example, 1, 2, how do we put that into practice? How do we have more diplomats, practitioners, bring that into everyday practice? In some ways, how Tagore said that teaching should be a transformative practice. Education should turn your worldview into relating somewhere in the relating as one with the world. So how do we do that? What would be your response as a practitioner?
You ask very difficult questions, Raghav. But my short short answer would be, we need to bridge the gap between theory and practice. I can tell you that when, if I look back at our curriculum, where, as you say, the realist paradigm was still very dominant, etc., and you had very little input on the thoughts of those in the South, of those practitioners. It says there's this group thinking in the IR schools and in political science. If you don't have Rosenbaum, if you didn't read, promoting Western thinking in our classrooms. Back home we just went to a very interesting period where they talked about decolonizing the education system. So I think it should start with your own scholars. What are they writing about? And do they reflect your values? How can your slogan, your rallying cry of the world is one family? That's not, if that is my orientation, my sense is that would be quite an interesting a worldview that should inform some writing. How do you do it? Because in practice, your diplomacy has also demonstrated that it is not some theoretical construct, you also practice it when vaccines were made available to developing countries. So there's something about your IR that don't neatly fit current theoretical frameworks. So perhaps it's a challenge to us. What in our own societies can we use as a framework, as a reference point to describe what we are doing? I think the other important thing is also for you to be exposed to diplomats. And the work that you are doing, Professor Adam, the work that you have done, you have another office there in the, have you been to that beautiful one there in the Taj Mahal? You should go there. They keep all the diplomats there. I think you should bring those diplomats here so that the students benefit there, because otherwise we'll speak to ourselves as diplomats. But it's that exposure that you should have, because you have confronted us also, you also confront us with your thinking. Some of us have studied, I'm not sure about you, Professor, but mine is decades ago that I went and studied these IR books. So perhaps you have new theoretical perspective that you can bring to the table. So it must be that collaboration between the practicing diplomats and the aspiring diplomats and academicians that sits amongst you. So it's that exchange that needs to happen. But it also requires you to think, does this framework that I'm being taught assist me? It also requires us, BRICS are doing it at G20, having these think tanks to collaborate. The problem is, my sense is that universities tend to prescribe the same books. So whether you were trained in London or in Cape Town, you are telling me the same thing. And I've always criticized our people in the finance ministries because it seems they went to the same business schools. So their theory of what will constitute growth and how development will occur is the same. So it's when you are challenging the dominant theories, when you are having these discussions among yourself, I think that is when you can contribute greatest to the development of our practice as diplomats. And by engaging us more frequently, that I like the idea, and here we are sitting with an example of Ambassador Bhatia, engaging actively as a fellow, having there are so many engagements that he has on these important topics. Because if you think that you can do a degree in international relations and have this paper, I must say I was not well prepared when I joined the foreign ministry, and perhaps that's where the foreign institutes, the training institutes come, because they orientate you a bit more. But there's a disconnect between what we were taught and what we are supposed to do. My focus in future, and perhaps this is my post-retirement career that I'm talking about, is I would work with universities, the international relations schools, and teach a course on the practice of diplomacy, diplomatic practice. I think there are, it's perhaps not a new idea, I think there are universities where they get former ambassadors and diplomats that come and teach you how do we negotiate a resolution. This thing that you see, the BRICS summit, here's the document. How is that drafted? How does this drafting work? What is the operational paragraph? What is the offer? And you know how important words are, huh? Whether you demand or you encourage or you welcome. These are all important things I think our students should know. And so I think that collaboration will be important. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think just to build on this, I would advise you to value the knowledge at the university in all branches of IR. And if you are lucky enough, as I was, to get into the diplomatic service with a strong IR and international law background, you are at the right place. Because my peers and my competitors were the guys who had studied chemical engineering, medicine, sociology, philosophy. They had no idea about what caused the First World War. They had not heard of the Soviet Revolution. Karl Marx, probably they could just spell it out, the name. So the knowledge of IR is a huge asset if you join the diplomatic establishment. But at the end of the day, what matters for a diplomat is the opportunity to soak the atmosphere of a foreign country where he spends 3 or 4 or 5 years, maybe sometimes even more. So then a different kind of creature emerges with the background of theory, the ability to transform yourself, to look at your own country, India, sitting in Pretoria, talking to Africans to see how they look at actually India, in various formats. So my point is, I agree with Cedric. I think greater exposure of the theorists and students to serving diplomats, to former diplomats is a useful way. But there is absolutely no shortcut to keep gaining knowledge. And just when you think I've got enough knowledge, you'll find that more is available for you to absorb. When I came in, I asked one of your colleagues whether now your writing examination is still in hand and you are doing it all on your laptop. And I got two answers. So I think if I were to ask that in Europe and America, they would laugh at you if you said, I'm still writing in hand, on paper, my examination. The world is changing. Only those who manage to run with it will succeed, will get the glory. And I think I'm very happy that after a long gap, a university has done something like this. All strengths to your help.
Thanks a lot. So now we have, yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Just one contribution to that scholarly question that you asked, and I liked the panel addressed it very well. You see, the question you're asking is very important, and I think we need to have constant discussions around the theories. Because yes, if you look at the text, the current text we're using, they're Eurocentric. There's nothing about us. And theory is important because it informs how we think about ourselves and the environment where we're operating in. There is an emerging debate in South Africa, as my deputy is saying, the High Commission, decolonization, coloniality, actually there's a theory coming, decoloniality, which simply means that your cultures, it incorporates, local thinking. For example, in Africa, we've got Afrocentricity. Of course, it's something that came from the diaspora African in America. But now it's been really doing a lot of changes in the academia in South Africa. We need to develop our own theories. I went to a conference here not long ago, academic conference, and the papers were sent to me. Everybody's quoting the European scholars. And now, if you do that, especially it was a conference on Africa, if you continue to do that, when you go to Africa, you are not going to go as an Indian. You are going to go as a European. And as a result, you are going to repeat the same mistake that Europeans did, colonialists. So India, in fact, has a lot of history, cultures, all this. You need to develop theories out of your achievements.
Actually, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that we have developed new theories. There is an Advaita, there is a Buddhism theory.
Yes.
But there is no such mechanism to put that into practice right now. So that way, we have a lot of research happening. There is a movement called Global IR, which is past 10 years has been producing a lot of literature. But there is no interface with practitioners. So that is where we are lacking in some ways.
Because I don't think we do enough as a university to bring that discussion on in a platform like this where you've got practitioners as well.
So we can, I know that this discussion will take more time, but we can have, later on more on it. Maybe we can have a specific session. Actually, it is a nice topic. So it's completely fine. I have here lights. I don't know. So let's conclude this session. So to conclude, as we have seen and heard from the discussion we had today, the emergence of BRICS Plus presents a complex and dynamic development with far-reaching consequences for the global order. I agree with the point that you have shared. It is not here about BRICS against the world order, but we can work in collaboration together. So BRICS Plus offers a platform for developing nations, particularly South Africa and India, to amplify their voices on the international stage and advocate for their interests. South Africa, with its unique position as a bridge between Africa and the developing world, can play a crucial role in fostering cooperation and development within BRICS Plus. It can serve as a gateway for the continent's vast resources and a champion for other Africans' specific needs and challenges. India, a rising economic and political power, can contribute its expertise in various sectors like IT and pharmaceutical and champion the cause of the Global South within the BRICS and also other Global South grouping like what Ambassador Bhatia has already mentioned. So India's assertive diplomacy and growing influence can shape the agenda of BRICS Plus and promote a multi-polar world order. As we move forward, it is crucial to continue exploring the potential of BRICS Plus and its impact on the international stage. By working together, we can achieve a more equitable and inclusive global order that reflects the rise of the Global South. Thank you everyone once again, and thank you for my dear esteemed guest panelists for joining us today. I hope that you have found this is as an informative and stimulating discussion. Now I would like to request please Sartak as the center coordinator to give a vote of thanks, and we'll end the discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, for present here. As we draw the curtains on this insightful panel discussion, I am imbued with gratitude for everyone who is seated here. Now, on behalf of the General Center for Global South and collaboration with the India Institute, I extend a heartfelt vote of thanks to both the panelists seated here, Mr. Cedric C. Crowley, the Acting High Commissioner of the Republic of South Africa and India, and Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, the Distinguished Fellow 146 Studies Program at Gateway House. And thank you for sharing your invaluable perspectives on multilateralism, the foundational ethos of BRICS, and the evolving concept of Global South and how solidarity works within our countries. And I think it's quite remarkable that we have organized this event exactly 6 decades and 9 years since the conclusion of the Bandung Conference, which you all spoke of at length. And I just want to add a little symbolical note that on this anniversary of Bandung, this congregation of students, academics, and professors seated at the same table as seasoned diplomats, practitioners of Global South countries, discussing a new era for the Global South at the center of global fine learning, situated in rural Haryana, and having such high demand that we run out of chairs to see people. I think it's very emblematic of the success of the Global South political project, which is guided by the Bandung Consensus, the Bandung Solidarity. And I thank you all for being a part of this beautiful moment. A special thanks goes out to Professor Hibatullah Adam, Professor of Economics and the Founding Director of GCGS, for moderating this session and giving us such meaningful discourses. Our audiences with professors, academic students, for making this engaging, especially Raghav. Thank you for your very insightful questions as well. And lastly, thank you for Team GCGS for helping organize this event and making this a success. Thank you one and all, and please join us for further events. And now Professor Adam will felicitate the guests. Let's start with Mr. Cedric C. Crowley.
Thank you. And all the best with your exams, sir.
Thank you very much.
And we also have the team from which you Mr. How are you?
Oh, very good. You should have shared your insights today. Okay, thank you.
And then we will have one push to use all this.
Is there here? 15?
Come, please come. Delegation.
Yeah, I will hand them first and then also
Sure,
because they
of
have.
course.
Next, if you can ask Mr. Longbow.
Okay, I will have since they are not here. So let's have all the.
Yeah, we can have a picture.
As a group.
Sure.
Please come. We will have that in the live.
Yeah, please join us. Please.
I don't think I'm entitled to a picture.
No,
Only for one minute.
No, no program. Please join us.
That's my name. Thank you very much. Come.
And now join us.
And then one with all of you, right?
Of course.
You can come here to
Yes,
Jane,
It's okay, it's not coming.
yeah, professors, please join
Yeah,
us and
Professor
speak.
Nupur Ruslan,
Yeah, come.
Professor Devendra.
Devendra, and also students. Yeah.
I want to look at this picture one day when you become the Secretary General. I say, I was in a presentation one day. Yeah?
So come, please join us all.
Just do not go get out of the chair. You go over there.
Can you?
So are they visible? Okay, fine.
So now take one picture and use joint.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful.